My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Good afternoon and welcome to LGBTQlife. I'm your host, Mick FitzGerald, and for those who've been on the moon, you may not know we've got an election coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and today we are starting our coverage of GE 2020, and LGBT life is appropriately. We're going to try and give a platform to some of the candidates that would be related to the LGBT community, and today we are delighted. We're going to start off with Social Democrats Sarah Durcan. Sarah will be running in Dublin Bay South, and Sarah, welcome to LGBTQ Life.
Thanks, Mick. Thanks for having me.
Sarah, you for those of us who have a bit of a penchant for politics, you ran in the local elections. I think that was your first time out. Was it a baptism of fire?
No, it was a really positive experience. I mean, it's such an honour to be able to walk around the city and meet people and talk to them about what really matters to them. So I loved every minute of it, and I'm really looking forward to being out on the streets as I have been over the last few weeks and talking to more people about what really matters to them.
You're in the Social Democrats. Now, if you go back to the 2016 elections, the Social Democrats were really more a concept than an actuality at that time. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to opt for the Social Democrats? You could have had half a dozen other parties to choose from.
Well, I did my research. I read their manifesto. I thought this was smart. I've always been interested in politics, but never felt like I had a political home. Mm-hmm. And particularly coming out of marriage equality as a woman and as a lesbian, it was really a moment where I went, perhaps there is a place in politics for me. Perhaps we have moved on as a society. And also, I think what they stand for, their ideas, their long-term vision, their evidence-based policy, and also the integrity of the party leaders. Also very strong on the arts as well, very strong on LGBT equality. So they felt like a party where I could belong. So I called them up. I joined the party. I said I would like to stand because I believe we need more women in politics. We need more diversity in politics, and we need more real and diverse experience there too. So that's why I joined. And I was nominated as the general election candidate in May 2018, just after the repeal of the 8th referendum. Yeah.
Slap me down on this one, but feel free to, Sarah. Many people would say Social Democrats, are they just the nice version of the Labour Party?
Not at all, not at all. You may know I was involved in Waking the Feminists, which was a gender equality movement in Irish theatre. So that was really about putting it up to the system to make sure that we have equality for women in Irish theatre, but really as a catalyst for equality in all its forms. So we had to do a lot of work to convince people that this was and I set a deadline of 5 years to achieve gender equality. We pulled in the research, we went into the Dáil, we spoke to the minister, we got the job done, and we are going to achieve pretty much gender equality within the 5 years, which no one thought possible but me and the rest of the Waking the Feminists. So yeah, we're nice, we care about people, we care about community. That's extremely important, and people do feel there's a contempt for people. There's a contempt for how people are struggling at the moment to get a roof over their heads, to have healthcare, to afford their childcare, to be able to spend time with their kids because they're stuck in traffic. So yes, we need a politics that care, but we also need a politics that's smart, and I believe that blend is there in the Social Democrats.
Does that translate to votes? And this is the point I would put to you, Sarah. I live in Dublin Bay North. Mm-hmm. Previously, we were Dublin North East. Dublin Bay North was the first time a female got elected in that area. Do women vote for women? Because if
everyone votes for women, and the research shows that when women run, that they are quite likely to be elected. The problem is helping women to run in elections. And in this election, for the first time, 100 years later after women got the vote, we have a woman running in every single constituency. That's a marker. We still have a long way to go. And it is challenging being a new contender in politics, but it's an absolute privilege to be able to say, I want to represent everybody and particularly over half the population, which don't have enough of a voice in our power. And we do need a greater diversity, because we need all our ingenuity and all our experience to address the real problems that we're facing at the moment.
Yep.
We can't just do it with a small slice of the population.
Yep.
That's not representation.
Is the fault then, not with the voters, but with the way the parties pick candidates? Because if I have a look at, I don't know what the Dáil is, at the most I suspect it's 40%, at the very most.
I don't think it's even that. I don't think it's even
Dublin
that.
City Council is just over 30%. So
Yeah.
in other words, every two councillors are male. Yet some of the most able people I know in there are female. So
Of course,
yeah.
yeah. The thing is, I think the main parties really haven't got serious enough, and I've heard this. I've been agnostic when I was an activist with Waking the Feminists. I would go and talk to anyone. I went to talk to women to the Labour women, to women in Fianna Fáil, to any party that would listen to this piece about gender equality. And it is tough for women in politics, and they do talk about the abuse that they get and the difficulties that they have. But the major parties aren't doing enough. They're doing the bare minimum to reach the quota that they have. But you see parties like ours, with no problem and not having to run a big campaign around it, are fielding over 60% of our candidates. We have 20 running right across the country, more than we had in 2016, and 12 of them are women.
Tell me about Sarah Durcan. What was your background? And you're not from Dublin.
But I've been here for about 25 years.
Yeah.
Many people, I would have come up to college in the mid-90s, and I've been fortunate that I'm of that generation that was on the cusp of the boom, that I didn't really have to think about immigrating after I went to college. I studied communications in DCU. I did spend some more time in the west of Ireland. I'm from Mayo originally. I've worked in Heritage, in the Cage of Fields, and in Roscommon. And then when I came back to do my master's in Dublin in about 2001, 2002, I did MA in Cultural Policy and Arts Management, and then I started working in theatre. I did a little bit of time with the promoter of Riverdance. I started working with the Corn Exchange, an award-winning theatre company. We toured the world. I've been general manager of Dublin Theatre Festival, Dublin Fringe Festival, and then in 2013 I joined Science Gallery International as a startup, building their business model, building their infrastructure, to achieve 8 science galleries, the model in Trinity College,
Indeed.
Dublin, which has been really successful in empowering young people in art and science. And our goal, which was really ambitious and very improbable, and I do like making improbable things possible.
Of course. Yeah.
So our goal was to have 8 science galleries by 2020. And just this Wednesday, we signed our 8th member, which is Emory in Atlanta.
Well done.
So we hit that goal. We've reached financial sustainability through that as well. So while I've been working in the arts, I have a very pragmatic view of that as well. And I think we need to enable creativity, and we need to enable innovation and the creative industries. And particularly, we need to empower young people to be resilient, empathetic, and creative, because they are the skills that we're seeing for the 21st century. And that's something I believe passionately about as well. And particularly having equality in that, because when we talk about women in politics, women in STEM, that's science, technology, engineering and maths, also there's an issue there, there's not enough representation. And I've also been very proud to be part of the first LGBT Equality in STEM Day as well, which is going right across the world and is now into its 3rd year.
Yep. Just coming back to something that you and I would have been involved in quite a bit, and that is the 22nd of May or the 15th of May 2015. I think that changed the perception of the world about how they saw Ireland, that suddenly we weren't John Wayne in The Quiet Man, and women weren't somebody there that could get beaten with a stick. That suddenly there's a whole positivity there, and it doesn't stem around our agrarian background or our revolutionary background. It's our cultural background. Do you think that is the way to go forward? Because we have, as you say, education, technology, tourism. We have massive potential to build on that because of the positivity that is towards Ireland at the moment.
Absolutely. I think we are seen as a liberal beacon at the moment when you see what's going on in the US and what's going on in other countries where they are fragmenting. And I think our democracy has been really strengthened by that ability to go out and and talk to people, that our politics, as brutal as they can be from time to time, are still very human. They're about having conversations, they're about figuring out what matters. And I think both through marriage equality and repeal the eighth, I don't think even yet the main parties and the main media coverage around politics has realised what a groundswell of change there is there that's been bubbling under. And you don't see these generational changes coming until they're there. You're right about them in retrospect. And that's what we're seeing now. And I when I'm talking to people of all ages, they're hungry for change. They're fed up with the status quo, or they're confused about it. And they do want to see new blood coming into politics. They do want to see more women, and they do want to see more diversity, about people who have real life experience, who haven't been lifetime politicians, coming in, putting themselves forward to be able to represent them and say, I'm standing up because democracy and what's going on in our country is too important to leave it to the same old, same old.
Yeah, I'll put something to you, because you said you were of the generation that didn't have to migrate. I did,
Yeah.
and I, and I won't go into that. But I think one of the reasons why we didn't want to stay here was because the stifling nature of politics is that you're going to vote the same way as your father voted, your grandfather voted, and so on and so forth. And one of the things I'm seeing, and again, I think it's a very, very positive development, and we saw this in the marriage equality, and we certainly saw it in the Eighth Amendment referendum. People weren't the younger generation weren't prepared to vote the same way as their families were, and ultimately they brought their families with them, which I thought was a fabulous development.
Exactly, and I think we're seeing today in climate change, with Greta Thunberg and so on, we're seeing families and people being led by the younger generation, and the younger generation saying, being politicised in a really great way, of being aware of what's going on in climate, being aware of how important it is to be kind and be inclusive to other people as well, and also their parents. So that intergenerational listening is really, really important, and I think it's something that we should be very proud of here in Ireland, and we should pay more attention to it in politics.
Is there a danger, and this is why when I go to some of the same demonstrations that you go to, what I see is a lot of the very committed people and the very active people, they're drifting across to what I would call the parties of identity politics. Politics is about practicality. You cannot change anything on the opposition benches. You can only change. And is that a cultural change we need to say? Is that we mightn't agree with everything, but somehow or other we have to take our message more mainstream?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe my day job is around financial management and negotiation. I work across the world, so I have to be able to negotiate with people who have completely different opinions. As an activist in Waking the Feminists, I had to sit across from people who were like, I don't know what you're talking about. They just didn't get it. But also in politics, more so now, we need to be coming more together to affect it, because if we are splintering, and I think the left in particular has an issue with that, to be realistic, and it's the tyranny of small differences. That's what I call it. That there's a job there to be done. I will go and talk to anyone. We will be prepared, if we go into government, to have discussions with everyone and be open to that, insofar as they are prepared to deliver on key social democratic policies as well. But I think there's an importance to identity politics. I think it's a phrase that is used in a very misleading way, but also that there is an onus on all of us as public representatives, if elected, to just get on with getting the job done, and be focused on the thing in the middle, not about my position and your position and so on, because people are fed up of that. We've no time to waste, either in the climate emergency that we're dealing with, the housing crisis that we're dealing with, people on trolleys. So people sitting on pinheads, I have no time for that. It's like, your job is to get the best thing done for the country, to solve the crisis, move on, focus on what you can do.
Can I then put something to you now? Pat Rabbit about 10 years ago said something incredibly cynical on RTE, said, that's what you say during elections. Regina Doherty said something very recently. She said, nobody reads manifestos. Well, actually, some of us do.
Well, I read the manifesto from beginning to end, and other people do too. People are intelligent.
Do you think then it is important? Now, you can't sue a politician for not keeping a promise, and and you can't always keep every promise, but do you think it is important that politicians actually intend and are somehow or other held to account for what they say, not only during elections but during other times as well.
Oh, absolutely, and the Social Democrats with Catherine Murphy has been doing Trojan work on that, on accountability and making politics not only more transparent but more accountable as well. And it's just not working at the moment not to have our ministers and public representatives accountable for what they do, and also our senior civil servants.
Yeah. On that, and I'm just going to digress slightly from what we had agreed to talk about. One of my great bugbears is because of the industry I'm in, and that is media. Now, everywhere, any of us who are involved in that know that the RTE footprint is massive. Not necessarily in Dublin, but elsewhere. And as a result, RTE seem to have a disproportionate influence. What's your thoughts on RTE? Do we need that monolith, or should we somehow
I think
rather
public service broadcasting is incredibly important, and I think the media. I studied communications, so the media has become fragmented, and I think it's a difficult time, and there's a lot of fear in that as well, and that does cause us to retrench. We need a strong media who are vibrant and diverse as well. So a monolith, I don't know if I'd call them a monolith, but they're I think community radio is an absolutely great thing. From Mayo, there's a very strong culture of community radio there as well. That doesn't mean to say that the media get everything right all of the time, particularly in a snap election, nor do polls get everything right. I don't think there's necessarily the time or the space that maybe there used to be to really find out what's going on the ground. So there is a little bit of that echo chamber, and you don't see the groundswell. We did, the predictions against marriage equality, the predictions against repeal the 8th, they weren't seeing it, and yet it was called in retrospect. But those of us who were on the doors and talking to people and having those human conversations, that's it. Like, Ireland makes up its mind in a very particular way, doesn't it?
It does. If it's any consolation, 2 nights before the marriage equality, a very prominent member of the Christian right rang me up and he said, I think it's very close. And I said, it's not even going to be close. I said, this is a certainty. You can put. I'll put money on it. And I think for those,
my dad said the same about the abortion referendum, and we do not agree on that at all. He's deeply conservative, in a way, but he said no, it's going to be like 60%. He told my mother, said no, and he was absolutely fundamentally opposed to it. And that's a wonderful thing in politics, that you can have people who are opposed to it but still be related to each other and sit down at the Sunday dinner or whatever. We have to be civilised, and I think other people are completely fed up of people just roaring and shouting at each other. I think we need more adults in the room, and I think the Social Democrats are and can be the adults in the room as well. Okay,
let's talk about, it's probably, there's 2 issues that are probably going to be the major issues, at least in terms of public exposure. The first one is housing. Do we have a structural problem or do we have a cultural problem? Because housing is an issue that if you've got any amount of money, you can fix any problem. However, the idea, and I talked to Dutch friends about this, is that they call it the Irish housing fetish, that we all have to own our own homes. Surely what we need is good quality housing at an affordable price.
Absolutely, you've got it in a nutshell. Good quality housing and an affordable price, but it's also integrated with transport and schools.
Of course,
we don't have schools that people can get to work easily. So we have to look at density as well in the city, and we have to look at moving outside of Dublin. There's this thing of like everything has to be in Dublin, but then we have commuter belts, and people are spending something like 10 days a year on average in traffic in Dublin. That's outrageous.
You have to look at the M50.
Yeah, and it's damaging our kids' health, driving them in and out to schools because they're sucking those fumes. It's damaging those of us who walk and cycle in the city as well. It's not an efficient way to get around. So to get back to the housing, yes, it is a structural issue. It is. I do think it is a systemic lack of ideological thinking in terms of like how the current government are thinking about it, that the market will fix it. Should the market themselves, the developers are saying we cannot build the number of houses. We need to build 30,000 houses a year. That's 150,000 houses minimum over the next 5 years. And we have stripped out that social housing, the building capacity that the county councils and the city councils used to have. So we need to have a housing delivery agency that can work across that and get that job done and get that industry up and going again. Because we give out about developers building hotels and offices and so on, and that is a major issue, and co-living things, because that's where they're making their money. We have to make it easier for people to build houses. I'm particularly interested in co-housing and community land trusts, and the way that the city thinks in its planning infrastructure about how it's prioritising housing. So in the Social Democrats, we are about building public housing on public land. We would alter the proportion of any new development to have to have 20% affordable housing on top of 10% social housing. Then we have to look at the rental market, because people I know and my colleagues, and I know many people who work in the arts, and they say to me, Sarah, I'm going to end up in a shed in my sister's garden when I retire, because there's no way as an artist working in Dublin, and that is anyone who's working in a precarious work who would be affected like that. And I talk to small and medium business people as well who are working in catering or food, and their staff, they can't get them because they're trying to work 2 jobs and they have to live far distances, and it's pushing up their wage bill. So on an economic point of view alone, our housing is crazy. But on a social...
Who should build this though, Sarah? Because I could show you a chart that goes back to about the 20s and 30s, and it shows you that when Ireland was dirt poor, we were building more housing than when we were, particularly social housing, than when we were filthy rich. Do you think this needs to be transferred back to the councils?
I think that's
properly resourced,
properly resourced. I think that is part of the solution as well, for sure. And it has to be done at a local level. But we do need to look at how we are designing our living spaces as well, because it's not sustainable to have many more housing estates of 3-bedroom semi-detached houses. We do have to look to a degree at density as well, because there are knock-on problems of just making this urban sprawl of low density housing. But that, again, as I say, has to be integrated with facilities, with recreation, with sports. There's such a lack of sports and cultural facilities now in the city. And we're a party that are all about the quality of life and giving people back their time. So money is one thing, but we're time poor as well.
Yep. Let's move on to another issue that I think is going to be quite prominent, and that is health. Now, my experience of the health system since I got over 60 is that it's okay. It's actually quite...
It's grand when you're in it.
Well, it's great when you actually get into it. But I mean, I've just had an appointment up in Beaumont in December. I was 18 months on a waiting list just to see a specialist, and then I'm going to be another 6-9 months just to get the operation that I need. Now, I am very praiseworthy of the system itself, but I wonder, isn't this 2-tier system that we're trying to sustain, or do we need to somehow or other take a view that we have to have at least a basic national health system of some variety?
Yes, that's called Sláinte Care, and Roisin Shortall has led on that. It's a single-tier system for the healthcare that you need when you need it.
Tell us how that works then now. What does that involve, Sarah?
So it involves primarily, like, one of the major issues, we won't go into all of the details.
Sure, it's very complex.
There's a very complex plan, and it is fully costed. People say, how are you going to pay for that, and how are you going to make savings? And you're just throwing more money into it. We're not just throwing more money into it, but we do need to invest significant money up front in order to then address the waste and inefficiency, move people away from having constantly going into an acute hospital. You shouldn't have had to go up to Beaumont. You could have gone into a primary care centre or a community care centre, got your tests done, see your GP, get blood tests done, all of that kind of things. Have even minor procedures done there as well. So care in the community is the way that the rest of Europe that is enlightened about healthcare like this. And there's been all of the experts in to talk to the Oireachtas Committee on that, and the Sláinte Care has been signed up to by every single party, but the government that has just fallen will not fund it, and they will not fund it properly when they get in again, despite what they say. But we would make that a primary priority for us going into government.
is without trying to put words into their mouth, is it because there is a philosophic distinction, and I'm no bones about which side I fall on this one, that either health is a right or health is a privilege. In other words, that the two-tier system comes along and says this group are entitled to inferior service to another group.
Yeah, health is a right, clean air is a right, housing is a right. Like, they have to be the basics. And it's time that we got back to the basics of having our politicians care about the human beings, like as us people to people, rather than being worried about the market and worried about this, that and the other. It's just not working. I think people are smart about that. They know they're paying double taxes for their healthcare and the health system. They know they're paying double taxes for childcare and so on. They know they're paying through the nose. So we want to make sure that we're increasing people's quality of life, so that it's not about reducing taxes, because that just drives up inflation. It doesn't mean anything to anyone over a certain amount of money. So we have to get real about what it's going to cost to deliver quality public services. And then it's all about better value for money for better quality of service.
Before we finish for today, Sarah, I want to talk to you about climate change, because it is almost the issue du jour, and tomorrow and whatever. You and I, who've got a bit of background in Australia, we have seen the impact of climate change in Australia.
I don't know if I'm out of background. I've spent some time there with Science Gallery.
You know what the environment is like. I mean,
yes.
To me, that's the ultimate wake-up call.
It is, and it's something that we can't be messing about with. We have to get on that. We have to, here in Ireland, we have to have better ways of working with farmers to improve our food output. And we have to make sure that we've clean air. Like in Poolbeg, we're listening to people, having real problems with asthma. In the city centre, we have the traffic. Today we are launching our biodiversity plan. We have Jen Whitmore down in Wicklow, who's an expert in this area. So we have both the climate collapse and also a biodiversity and an extinction coming with all of the animals that are dying. And a place the size of Ireland has just burned to the ground in Melbourne, where I spent some time. Some of my colleagues there, the air quality is brutal, and their families have lost their homes. So we can't afford not to address climate change. And if you look at somewhere like Australia, which has been very dependent on coal and fossil fuels, they actually have the opportunity to become the world's first superpower in alternative energy. And I think that's something we should be looking at here, not necessarily a superpower in it, but certainly looking at alternative energies and prioritising those.
Yep. Since last question, because it's part of your world out there in Sandymount, we've had the same issue out in Clontarf.
Yeah, because it's blowing over to you.
Rising sea levels, apart from anything else. Is rising sea levels a potential problem in Sandymount?
Yes, it is everywhere, and that's something we have to look
at.
And as you know, with Science Gallery International, we also have Venice in our network as well, so we know all about and in every single Science Gallery, water, rising sea levels, the quality of our water, and the likelihood that it could disappear. Sure, we had a drought here a couple of years ago in Ireland, where it rains all the time because of the lack of infrastructure in our water system.
We're going to have to stop there. I want to... Sarah Duncan is the name. #1 in Social Democrats in Dublin Bay South. I'm sure she will love you for that. I want to thank Usman for doing a terrific job on the desk. I'm Mick Fitz. I'll be back in a week's time. You take care.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.